figured, since we haven't really talked about it a lot, we're going to talk about what's in the Turbo Mustang. Obviously, we ran 1090s in the quarter mile with it, so it's getting pretty quick. It's really a basic setup, and we're going to run through everything from what's in the engine all the way to the rear end. So let's get into it. All right, guys, so initially in the journey of building the car, I've had it for probably about 8 years now. Pretty much, I just wanted something that was fun to drive. I could street strip it. I didn't have a lot of money at the time when starting to build this, so a lot of the parts don't go together, which you'll see, but it works. And this is kind of showing that, you know, you can go fast and have fun on a budget. So we're going to start in the very front. We got a Champion radiator. Really not needed, but I think the last one was leaking at some point. We're running the Street Fire ignition box from MSD. That goes along with that's tied into, I should say, the Holley 650 Super Sniper. So we got fuel injection on this. Obviously, that's getting air forced into it by a On3 Performance 70mm turbo. We're at about 16 psi of boost. Now, when I was building this initially, obviously with a budget in mind, I didn't put an intercooler in it. One, because the cost on top of it initially, whenever, you know, we didn't have that much money to throw towards it, and two, the piping, you know, I just didn't want to have to deal with all that. So we'll get to that in a minute. So turbo goes straight into the intake. The hot side of the turbo system, we got BBK headers. They're shorty BBK headers. So this header is actually the passenger side header. So they're facing forward and down. Then I just kind of made my own hot side. It's hard to see. Don't look at the welds. You can see the wastegate down there. That is a eBay 50mm wastegate. Have not had any issues with it. So obviously, since we don't have an intercooler, initially I wasn't running anything to help cool the air going in, and I believe at some point I had some detonation at the track, and it did crack a piston a couple years ago, so I did put pistons in this motor. The block was not hurt. So since then, we added, which I'll show the rest of it in the back, some water methanol injection, a Snow Performance kit. So that injects water and methanol into the carb hat, or the intake hat, and cools the charge, and also does increase the octane of the fuel. So going from the top of the engine, obviously we got our Sniper EFI unit on there. We have a Summit Racing regulator. We got 8 AN lines feed and return from the pump and from the regulator to the EFI unit. We have I believe a 2-inch spacer under the unit right there. Now here's where the fun stuff begins. This is a dual plane wind 8011 intake manifold. Obviously, it's better than a stock manifold, I'm sure. Not the best for a drag racing application, but it's what I got. And I'm sure we could pick up some horsepower by swapping that out, but it's not really on the top of the list, and it runs pretty good right now. So going lower into the engine, we got they're Ford Racing cylinder heads. I'll put the part number up there. It's like a GT40 style, but they are aluminum and made by Ford Racing. They flow pretty good. I got a good deal on them, so that's why we're using them. We just got a MSD distributor right there, and that's all controlled by the Sniper EFI unit. Going deeper into the engine, we have a E303 cam, which came with the short block that I bought. I bought that used, so obviously it's not a turbo cam. Once again, just rolling with what I got. The short block is a Ford Racing short block, It is a 5-liter engine. I forgot to say that in the beginning. It is a 5-liter. Then your normal accessories on the front of the engine. Still running an alternator, about a 100 amp alternator. It has kind of a little bit of trouble keeping up with the electric fans because I do have Ford Contour fans. We made a video on that a couple years ago. So they're Ford Contour fans. I have a Ford Contour. They flow really well. I'm trying to think of what else we got up here. We got a eBay turbo blanket. About $30 off of eBay. It works really well. Keeps the heat in. Keeps the engine bay not as hot in that area. Alright guys, so for the exhaust on the vehicle, it's pretty simple. We didn't want to run it all the way back to the back, obviously for keeping the budget down. And not really having a lot of space to do that. You'd have to run it kind of down through there. So it comes out of the turbo, takes a hard right. You see the O2 sensor right there. You come around here, and it dumps right there. It does have a muffler right there. So it is a small glass pack. It does do a little bit, kind of takes the edge off of it. The car really isn't that loud if you've heard it from the other videos. So the turbo quiets it down a lot, and then obviously the muffler helps a little bit also. Alright guys, so looking under the vehicle now, we have a Ford 3-speed C4 transmission. It has a bunch of modifications done to it. I bought it as a core and then rebuilt it, added some clutches. It's got a Performance Automatics C4 servo on it, a Dynamic Racing Transmissions manual valve body, and then a Edge Racing Converters 3000 stall converter in there. That's what a foot brakes to. I'm sure it would stall a little higher if we had a trans brake, but we do not have a trans brake in this trans. It's got a bunch of mods done to it, and high performance bands, all that stuff. Moving back, we have just a stock drive shaft from this vehicle. We have a drive shaft loop right there. Moving back, we have a Ford 8.8 rear end. This did have originally a 3.8 liter engine in it. So it was a V6 car, so it came with a 7.5 Ford rear end. We swapped that out for a Ford 8.8, and it has 373 gears in it. And then we also have a trans cooler up front, obviously to keep the trans fluid nice and cool. Now, we're going to move on to suspension. Alright guys, so front suspension on this, it's pretty much stock for the most part. Stock K-member and control arms. We do have strange adjustable struts. They're really nice. Have messed with those a bunch. Get the front end up to get the rear to bite at the track. Stock springs up here. And then also I forgot to mention with the engine, we have solid motor mounts in this. Feel a little bit of vibration from those. They're actually not too bad though. Not as bad as I thought they'd be. And then you can see the hot side for the turbo right there. Don't mind the welds. But alright, now to the rear suspension. Alright guys, so rear suspension on this, like I said, it's a Ford 8.8 rear end. We have tubular control arms, lower and upper. You can see the upper up there. Poly bushings on those. Stock brakes back here. Adjustable strange shocks on here. Factory sway bar. We also did a sway bar delete in the front for making room for the turbo kit, and also it kind of helps the front rise a little bit better when you're launching. So pretty simple back here. We do also have some Moroso Trick drag racing springs right there. I had to cut those down and lower to get the car to go a little lower in the rear because it was pretty raked. While we're down here, we'll look at the fuel system. I have this is a AEM 400 liter an hour pump. I was running a Walboro 255, but I did start running out of pump. The pressure was starting to go down whenever boost was at the 15 psi, 16 psi. So we got that external pump right there, sitting below the tank, so it's got good fuel. So fuel kind of gets pulled into it easier. We are running stock tank. We do have a filter sock in the tank to filter out before the pump any debris or anything like that. You can go up a little farther, and then we have I can't remember what micron it is, but a pretty big Jegs filter, fuel filter up there. It looks pretty small from here, but let me get a different angle on it. So there is the Jegs filter. It's got a removable element in there. It is about 10 inches, 11 inches long, so it's pretty long. So it should filter pretty well. Now we're going to go look in the trunk. Alright guys, so as you saw, we did not have the battery in the front. We got it relocated back here. So there's a battery tray. We got the ground just going down there and grounded to the body. And the hot wire runs all the way up there. We have a 200 amp circuit breaker. I have popped that before cranking the vehicle for a long amount of time, so it does pop at a reasonable amperage. You always want something like that on here. Obviously, you would probably want also a battery cutoff switch in the back bumper, which I'm planning on doing this winter. I haven't gotten there yet. Obviously, if you get in an accident, they can shut the battery power to the vehicle off, all that stuff. So going over here, we have our water meth injection tank. Holds about a gallon. I can probably get around total probably 12, 15 passes, maybe estimate on a full tank of that. And there's different jets to put in it also in the front nozzle. And there's your pump. You can look up the specs on all that. It pumps pretty high PSI up there, and it atomizes it pretty well. So that's really all that it is back here. Okay, so inside the car, I figured I'd show you a couple of things we got going. The setup in here, we got trans fluid temp, our boost gauge, RPM, our Holley Sniper handheld unit. So you can see a lot of data on that, which is really cool. HVAC still works, heat still works, no AC. We got oil pressure down there. Our low water meth level sensor. If the water meth level in the water meth tank goes low or starts to go low, that'll go red. Green LED up there to show whenever the water meth is spraying into the intake, so whenever it's activated. Burnout switch for doing a burnout to turn on and off the two-step. Light for the engine bay, fan high, and then obviously ignition. What else we got? Our shifter for the 3-speed Ford C4. It's a B&M ratchet shifter. Works pretty good. And then in the back of the car, just a rear seat delete. And that's about it for the Turbo Mustang. It weighs about 3,000 pounds without me in it. So it's pretty light for what it is. For being more of a street car. It does have slicks on the back, 10.5 or 28 by 10.5s by 17s. So that's about it. It has, obviously, like I said, went 1090s, and really for nothing special, I've probably made 50 passes with this car, or with the car and with this engine, and only really had the one issue with the breaking a piston. That is my fault. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer them.